The J1250 is a small sensored old digital camera, but can you make interesting images with it? Let's have a look at it in this video. Welcome back to my channel. Today for the sixth and final episode on the box of digital cameras that I bought some time ago. Today I'll be looking at the J1250 camera, which has a very small sensor, the size of which you can see up here. If you didn't see the previous episode on the Ricoh HC15, I'll leave a link to it up here as well. And you can also see links to all the previous episodes down below in the description. As you can see, it's a pretty small camera, so it's definitely both portable and pocketable, but though it's small, it still has a 2.7-inch screen on the back, which is also very bright, so it's very usable in harsh light, even in strong sunlight. With regard to features and functions, it places itself somewhere in the middle of the 6 cameras that I have reviewed. Though it's lacking some of the control features that I would like. There's a bit of a control of shutter speed, but I haven't found any way to control the aperture, and that's the thing I miss quite a lot. There's a lot of semi-automatic modes that you can use to shoot with this camera, but there's no full control like manual or shutter priority or aperture priority modes. That would be the most normal modes for me to use on any camera, and I would prefer that these were available on this camera, and it should have been easy to implement this in software, as they have gone a bit of the way with this camera, but not the whole way. I'll come back to what is lacking. The macro mode on this camera is decent, like it is on many other of the small digital cameras that I have used from this box. But this one is pretty good. If you set the lens to wide, you can get as close as 5 centimeters. And if you then set the ISO to the lowest value, which is 80, it will be at its widest aperture, and the depth of field will be very, very small. So you can control the depth of field very much in macro shoots, but not in any other kind of photography. Starting the camera is pretty fast. It boots up in around 1 second, maybe 1.5 seconds. That's pretty fast. And if you zoom on this camera, which goes from a not very wide 35mm to 175mm, which is quite decent, it also is pretty fast. It takes around 1.5 seconds to zoom from wide to telephoto. Unfortunately, there's no RAW mode on this camera. You can only store images in JPEG. But it's okay image quality. The shutter speed on this camera is set automatically between 4 seconds and 1/2000th of a second in most shooting modes. But you can set also the shutter speed to somewhere between 2 seconds and 30 seconds. I tried to shoot some bicyclists during a triathlon event, and even when I set the ISO, which can be set between 80 and 1600 on this camera, you can do it manually. Even setting it to 80, I had the shutter times of 1/150th to 1/200th of a second, and I didn't get the blurred background that I wanted so much from these images. So no real luck here. Then I tried to set the shutter time to 2 seconds manually, but then the images were vastly overexposed and didn't come out well. So no luck there. And there's no built-in ND filter in this camera, and there's no filter thread, so I can't put an external ND filter on it to get the longest shutter times. So no luck there getting nice images from this camera. The images are okay, but doesn't have the background blur that I would like. Not like the 1DX images that I shot at the same event, having full control of my shutter speeds. That's the way to get good shots in this kind of situations. This camera can do time-lapse, but is very limited with regard to the interval between shots. It can only do intervals from 30 seconds and upwards, and that's very limiting. Consider that for a video of 10 seconds duration displayed at 25 frames per second, you would have to shoot for a bit more than 2 hours. A sunset time-lapsed on this camera would be over in much too short time. It is not very useful. One thing is very well implemented in this camera. That is when you do the time-lapse, the camera goes into a hibernation mode in between the shots. And I even did a shoot of more than 4 hours where the camera shot almost 500 images, much more than the CPA rating of this camera. So that's quite awesome that it can do this and save so much battery that it can shoot so many images. But let's look at some more images from this camera, images that came out pretty well. In conclusion, I must say that although I liked the size and weight of this camera and most of the images that came out of this camera, I don't like the limitations that this camera has. That you have no way to control shutter speed beyond the 2 to 13 seconds manual setting, I find peculiar. That GE gave it an otherwise well implemented time-lapse mode that only allows intervals of 30 or more seconds is, in my opinion, nuts. It could have been a very capable camera for exactly that purpose with its battery saving feature. That the lens only zooms to 35mm full frame equivalent is not very good in my opinion. But of course, at that day where this camera was produced, it might be the normal. The reason I review old cameras is to find cheap, awesome cameras that does very well for very little money. But I don't think that this camera, although it might be representative for the day it was produced, I don't find that it was a very good camera. The images came out well, yes, but there's so many limitations on the functionality of this camera. I hope you liked my review of the small J1250. Despite I didn't like the camera as such, I liked to do the review of this camera. It's always fun to try and find the limitations of small cameras. And by the way, I bought another box of 20 small point and shoot cameras, both old digital cameras and also some analog film cameras. Some of them are working, some of them partly working, and some of them work perfectly well. So if you like to see reviews of those cameras, stay tuned on this channel. So thank you very much for this time, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video. It'll help me keep this channel running and do more reviews. So thank you very much for this time, and bye for now.